Okay, good evening, everyone. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Jason Salento. Welcome. We have our Old Glory here, and then we have an audience, so let's please stand and rise with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight at our annual town hall on redevelopment here in the borough of Dunellen. I'm Mayor Jason Salento, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to walk our community through the redevelopment initiatives taking shape across our community. Tonight, we will be sharing the updates on our redevelopment plan and our master plan, our climate resiliency plan, the completion of several key projects that have welcomed new residents and commercial activity to our Miracle Mile, and a preview of what is planned for 2026 and the year ahead. And we'll also conclude with a question and answer for about 10-15 minutes, get some input, get feedback, maybe some compliments, share your concerns, but we'll be here to talk with you. This presentation is designed to give residents a clear understanding of how redevelopment happens here in Dunellen, from initial planning through approvals, construction, and project completion. Redevelopment enhances our streetscape, modernizes aging properties, and improves our infrastructure and attracts new businesses, shops, and restaurants to our community, all of which I believe we all know strengthen our local economy and help stabilize the tax burden on residents. As Dunellen continues to evolve, our mission remains focused on responsible and community growth, community-centered growth. Recent projects and those underway reflect a bright future for Dunellen, expanding housing options, supporting new commercial opportunities, improving public spaces. While preserving Dunellen's heritage, these initiatives ensure our community remains vibrant and resilient for future generations. A key focus of tonight's conversation is going to involve payment in lieu of taxes, or the abbreviated version of pilots, as you hear, our short-term tax incentive programs. These financial tools enable the borough to transform long underutilized properties into vibrant, significant revenue-generating assets. And residential property values, as we all know, have risen significantly faster than commercial values in recent years. And that's been resulting in an over nearly 90% residential tax burden on our tax base. Strategic redevelopment helps rebalance this by increasing commercial value and expanding the revenue generated in our downtown. The revenue produced through these programs helps offset municipal budget costs and supports debt services on critical infrastructure improvements, reducing pressure on homeowners. Community input, I just want to stress, has guided this work every step of the way. Through surveys, meetings, and public engagement over the years, residents have truly helped shape the redevelopment vision we are carrying out today. Together, we are building a stronger and more resilient Dunellen, and I thank you for being a part of the process, and this annual town hall is a part of that process. So before I start into my part of the presentation, I just want to say thank you to our professionals for being here, the Blaston School for being here. Our professionals are here pro bono. They're not charging the town, so that's a great thing. So give them a round of applause for that. Recognizing a few people in the audience tonight, we have our business administrator, Alex Miller, our municipal clerk and registrar, Lauren Statz, our one of our councilwomen, Trina Rios, and we have many of our fire department members. Oh, Councilman Bill Scott, he's also our fire chief, and our public information officer, Billy George, and Ryan, who also is our IT guy. They help put everything together. So let's give them a round of applause as well. Nothing is possible without a good support team, so thank you all for what you do. So, this evening I'm joined by a panel of professionals who have played an important role in Dunellen's redevelopment progress over the past 2 decades, and this has been a 2-decade effort. Throughout this town hall, they will share expertise on topics including the history of redevelopment in Dunellen, ongoing planning initiatives, municipal engineering, the planning board's role in all of this, redevelopment agreements, annual service charges, and pilots, redevelopment bonds, affordable housing requirements, which are mandated by the state of New Jersey, the financial impact of new developments, historic preservation, and economic development. Before we move into the panel discussion, I would like to begin with a look back at the origins of redevelopment in Dunellen as understanding how we started helps shape and understand where we are at currently and where we are headed. So Dunellen's modern redevelopment efforts began in 2001 when Mayor Robert J. Cedar and the Borough Council authorized the planning board to study areas along Route 28, which we know as North Avenue and Boundbrook Road, for potential redevelopment designation. This work led to the adoption of the Dunellen Downtown Redevelopment Plan in 2003. This is a newer one, but we'll go over what the old one was. Establishing a long-term roadmap for revitalizing the borough's core business district. Since then, Dunellen has continued to revise and update its master plan, most recently in 2016 and in 2023, to reflect community needs and support a vibrant and sustainable downtown. I know our planner will probably go over a master plan, but for those who don't know what a master plan is specifically, it's a 10-year roadmap strategic plan for the municipality on where we're going with redevelopment, infrastructure, and other factors that are the pillars of our community. 2001, as we know, the borough took its first formal step toward revitalization when the mayor and council directed the planning board at the time to conduct a preliminary investigation of the Route 28 corridor. In 2003, the planning board adopted its report titled Report on a Study to Determine the Qualification of the Dunellen Downtown Redevelopment Study Area as a redevelopment area. They made sure it was a tongue twister. And forwarded to the mayor and councils. And then in May of 2003, the borough officially designated the area as in need of redevelopment, marking the first major milestone in Dunellen's redevelopment timeline. So well over 23 years ago. In July of 2004, Dunellen adopted phase 1 of its downtown redevelopment plan, which established zoning and land use guidelines for redevelopment projects. The plan designated 3 primary redevelopment sites. Site 1, which is the north side of the train station, Site 2, which is the south side of the train station, and then Site 3, which is the 19-acre Art Color Complex, if we know the history, now the Dunellen Station project. A 4th redevelopment area, known as the next phases redevelopment area, was later added. That encompassed the additional parcels along North Avenue and Boundbrook Road. And around this time, in 2004, the Art Color Complex owner expressed interest in redeveloping the site from an industrial complex into a mixed-use residential and retail destination, and several early redevelopment concepts were considered. So, moving to 2006, the borough designated Kaplan Companies as the redeveloper for the Art Color site, pending the execution of a redevelopment agreement. When the negotiations failed to produce an agreement, Kaplan's designation was withdrawn. In January of 2007, Baker Residential was selected as the new redeveloper. However, before an agreement could be finalized, the 2007-2008 financial crisis forced the project to pause at the developer's request, delaying any redevelopment efforts until the economy began to recover. Fast forward basically 10 years, the economy did begin to improve. Interest in redeveloping the Art Color Complex did return in 2017, and the borough entered into an agreement with Brudner Redevelopment Partners Urban Renewal LLC, the same property owner at the time in the 2004, 5, 6, 7 era, same property owner. The agreement called for 130 for-sale townhomes, 252 rental apartments, including 58 affordable housing units in the rental component, and a 10,000 square foot retail building on the former World Gym property. Fully completed in early 2023, the project, now known as the Dunellen Station, is home to more than 600 new residents and includes amenities such as a clubhouse, fitness center, pool, and outdoor gathering spaces. Kay Hovanian, who is represented here tonight, constructed the townhomes while Prism Capital Partners oversaw the apartments and retail elements. Fast forward to 2020, I come on the scene as mayor. We appointed a planning firm as municipal planner to support the Dunellen Borough through its next phase of redevelopment. Historically, up until this point, we were kind of not using a planner. We were doing a case-by-case basis, but if we were going to move the town forward, we recognized at the time that we really do need to really be planning these initiatives short-term, mid-term, and long-term. So we brought on a firm called DMR Architects. But The onset of COVID-19 pandemic soon caused delays across the state, as we know, as office closures prevented needed approvals and supply chain disruptions slowed construction on the Art Color project. During this time, the borough collaborated with the planning firm to develop the community vision plan, which collected feedback from residents and business owners to help guide future redevelopment decisions. And I'll say that was the initial process after the initial 2004 efforts, where we really started collecting annually the public's feedback on what they see the future of Dunellen's downtown being, and has really helped shape what our zoning laws have become for the redevelopment area. In 2021, the results of the visual preference survey informed updates to the redevelopment plan's design standards and development guidelines. Construction on the Dunellen station resumed in progress towards completion. Interest in redevelopment also expanded, with small, mid-sized, and large developers expressing interest in investing in Dunellen's downtown. By 2022, Dunellen saw a renewed investment in development activity across the central business district along Route 28. Since 2020, approximately $175 million has been invested in the downtown projects, both new construction as well as facade improvements. And this also includes the Dunellen Station project. The redevelopment plan was amended in 2022 to allow wineries, distilleries, and breweries, require native plantings, rain gardens, and pervious pavement, and support environmentally conscious development. The borough adopted a short-term tax abatement program to help property owners improve their buildings. And really, because you have the pilot, which is more long-term, we wanted to make sure that those property owners who have commercial properties within the downtown corridor that want to do smaller projects, or long-term property owners want to do improvements to their property, they also have an opportunity to have an incentive should the project actually qualify. Our planning firm completed the 2022 master plan reexamination with complementary efforts, including climate resiliency planning, an active transportation study, and a complete and green streets planning. Again, the master plan reexamination, seeing what we accomplished over the last 10 years prior to what we want to do moving forward. In 2023, the borough updated the master plan to incorporate the findings of that 2022 reexamination, including climate resiliency measures, transit-friendly planning, walkability, bikeability, and green street design. The redevelopment plan was amended to allow for expanded uses such as film production studios, artists live workspaces, entertainment venues, grocers and supermarkets, and institutional uses, further to diversifying the opportunities within the redevelopment zone. So the movie says, if you build it, they will come. Our idea is, if you zone it, they will come. In 2023, again, climate resiliency remains a guiding factor in redevelopment decision-making. I think that's important to know, because people see redevelopment, they think what's going to happen to stormwater, what's going to happen to runoff. Well, these projects are being built first off on previously zoned and regulated old regulations. Now they have to be built up to current code NJDEP, which they're very strict, plus adhere to what our climate resiliency plan dictates. We're very environmentally conscious in Dunellen as these projects are being built. The plan uses updated NJDEP climate projections to evaluate vulnerabilities across residential, commercial, and industrial areas, identify critical infrastructure needs during emergencies, analyze impacts of the borough's planning documents, and recommend strategies and design standards to reduce long-term risks. This ensures that Dunellen does grow responsibly while preparing for future environmental challenges. Several significant redevelopment projects were completed in 2024. Well, really the last 2 years, marking a major step forward in Dunellen's revitalization efforts. We have 745 Boundbrook Road, 150 North Avenue, Metro 526, all open the past 2 years, bringing new residents, new businesses, and renewed vitality in the Miracle Mile. Dunellen Station transformed, as we all know, that the long underutilized industrial site into a thriving mixed-use community. Metro 526 introduced new rental apartments, including 6 affordable units on North Ave, well, Boundbrook Road, North Ave, replacing buildings lost to a fire damage. So again, we're building these properties where it's vacated, damaged, depreciated, valued properties, therefore increasing rateables and value in our downtown. Meanwhile, 150 North added a new commercial spaces with 14 residential units and 2 affordable units, and offers covered parking for residents and business users,
And 745 Boundbrook Road provides 23 residential units with affordable units in them. Once where we all know Roxy and Duke's. I love that place, but unfortunately they closed because of COVID, leaving a vacated and undervalued and depreciating in value property. Now sits a brand new over $8 million project bringing new ratables to our downtown. One of our key accomplishments in 2024 was the creation of the borough's Department of Community Development. We have our director here today. He'll be speaking shortly. This department was established to better coordinate redevelopment, zoning, land use, reviews construction, and code enforcement, giving us more integrated and efficient approach to managing growth and maintaining high community standards. Leading this new department is our Community Development Director and Planning Board Secretary, Derek White. As I noted, you'll be hearing from him shortly. Basically consolidate a lot of divisions that were speaking separately and working separately into one department and a hierarchy that can hold them accountable. So Dunellen's redevelopment efforts have earned us several awards. We've been featured in the Business View magazine, New Jersey Future Smart Growth Award, and the NJ American Planners Association Great Downtown Award. So a lot of great pride and recognition for what we've been doing over the last several years. In addition to these awards, Dunellen's redevelopment work has also gained significant media attention. We've been in the Real Estate New Jersey magazine cover and feature, My Central Jersey. Mike Deek seems to be a very big fan of Dunellen, so thanks, Mike. And then New Jersey 101.5 features us frequently on the efforts that we're doing. And we're very appreciative of that because any good press is good press for Dunellen, right? Give us the highlights. Late last year and throughout this year, we are continuing our efforts on downtown beautification. That is one of the great benefits of redevelopment in the downtown. It brings beautification, streetscape improvements, pedestrian safety. You may have noticed in September of 2024, the North Avenue Treescape project brought new life to the corridor by replacing dead and declining trees with healthy new plantings, improving both the appearance and long-term vitality of the streetscape. One of our key priorities has been improving safety and visibility downtown, specifically for pedestrians. So we've worked with the New Jersey Department of Transportation in moving forward with installing, they've been installed rapid rectangular flashing beacon lights along the Route 28 corridor. These pedestrian activated signals will make crossings much safer. We were able to, and this again, a benefit of redevelopment, we're able to fund them through the community benefit contributions from our redevelopment projects. Otherwise, if we did this, it would be directly from tax revenue. We are committed to enhancing our parks. Moorcraft Park received a new playground over the last 2 years in phases, giving families a safer, more modern, and more engaging space, also ADA compliant and accessible. Like the pedestrian safety improvements, this project was made possible largely through community benefits from one of the recent development projects. Now, when you say community benefit projects and benefits, the projects still need to be in the vicinity of that project because it needs to benefit the project, but the greater public at large, but it needs to be accessible. So a park near one of the projects, pedestrian safety throughout the downtown, because these projects increase walkability to the train station, to the businesses. So all makes sense for what a community benefit would do for what these projects are able to provide. We're also requesting, we've also been working with PSE&G on upgrade to decorative lights along North Avenue in Jackson, from Jackson to Madison by replacing older high pressure lights, sodium fixtures with energy efficient LEDs. We have clearer and brighter lighting that improves safety and elevates the overall feel of the downtown at night. So you might have noticed those old soft looking ones. Now it's nice and bright. Opportunity to walk in a safer environment at night in the downtown. In 2025, we reached an important milestone with the completion of 745. We already discussed that. This was a project that replaced the old Roxy and Duke's who went out of business due to COVID, and it's called the Gateway. I think it's a nice improvement, especially with the landscaping coming in from the Middlesex border into Dunellen. So an update on the special improvement district study in 2024 through 25, we undertook a special improvement district study with our consultant in Creative Strategies. A SID is essentially defined is a defined commercial area where businesses contribute to an additional assessment to support things like marketing, beautification efforts, events, and coordinated district management. These tools can strengthen downtown, but after reviewing the study and hearing directly from our business community, it was abundantly clear that they did not wish to move forward with the SID. So with that plan, we plan to respect that position, and the borough will not pursue its implementation at this time. So we had said to them, if you don't want it, we won't do it. We will just have to come up with another plan. So that's what we're going to wind up doing. At the same time, we also gained valuable insight from the Rutgers Blaustein School, who's here tonight, which conducted a Dunellen downtown survey in 2025. This survey helped us understand what residents and stakeholders believe makes a great downtown, and will continue to guide our planning and revitalization efforts as we look toward the future. Again, using results from the study, results from the conversations tonight to help guide what we're bringing Dunellen towards in the future for redevelopment efforts in our downtown. A major focus of our advocacy for Dunellen downtown is securing long need improvements to the Dunellen train station, right? That's our greatest asset in the downtown outside of our wonderful mom and pop shops. For several years, we've been in constant communication with New Jersey Transit since I assumed office in 2020, and with our state and federal partners to push for immediate fixes and long-term upgrades. New Jersey Transit's repeated visits have only reinforced the need for safer, more reliable, and fully accessible facilities. A significant step forward came this past September when borough officials and I met with state and federal legislatures with New Jersey Transit leadership. After reviewing the station with them, NJ Transit outlined clear goals: short-term cleaning and repairs, midterm safety upgrades, such as new railings and potential platform improvements, and long-term plans for elevators and a new platform to achieve full ADA accessibility, also pending any state and federal funding that would help support that. This is a part of the conversation because the NJ Transit and our train station is really a part of transit-oriented development. President and CEO Chris Calori has reaffirmed to me the agency's commitment to these upgrades and agreed to advance a concept plan for the new station. Securing the plan before Governor Murphy leaves office remains a top priority because it will help unlock state and federal funding. So we're waiting for that. If anybody wants to write the governor, by all means, remind him that he owes us a concept plan. And I say that as a joke, but in good faith, the governor has worked with us very well. We continued building momentum in November of this year when we welcomed U.S. Senator Andy Kim for a small business walk, station tour, and ride and talk with local commuters. Two of whom are here today, Trina Rios and Rob Rios. He heard directly about the station's importance to our downtown and the daily challenges on the Raritan Valley line, underscoring the need for federal support, including full Gateway project funding and better access to one-seat rides to New York. We'll keep working with New Jersey Transit, the RVL Mayor's Alliance, and all levels of government to ensure Dunellen gets the station improvements our residents and commuters and business owners deserve. It's a top priority for this administration and our council. So as we look ahead to 2026, because I know you've heard enough from me, our focus is on continuing the strong planning and redevelopment work already underway. We have several new projects currently being reviewed by our redevelopment professionals, and we continue to approach our redevelopment plan as a true living document. That means taking a fresh look at key elements like parking ratios, development standards, and land use goals so that our policies reflect the borough's current and future needs, and really reflective of what our community wishes the downtown to look like moving forward. One major area we'll be evaluating more closely is the missing middle housing. These are smaller multi-unit or cottage-style homes that provide more attainable housing options and help diversify a community's housing portfolio. I'll speak for myself. I believe that this type of housing could make a lot of sense in our redevelopment plan in our downtown, and we plan to explore those opportunities further in 2026. If we want housing to be affordable and sustainable, allowing younger families and seniors who want to stay in town to build equity and generational wealth, fixing that gap is in the missing middle options has to be a part of the solution. Building and developing a downtown is important. Having a diverse portfolio between rentals and other forms and for sale units need to be a part of that conversation, especially with missing middle housing. And as many of you know, the Special Improvement District will not be moving forward based upon the feedback from our business community. Because of that, and I said, well, if they don't want it, we gotta figure something else out. We're now looking at alternative strategic ways to accomplish our downtown goals. We will be working closely with our Office of Community Development, our DDMO, which is the Dunellen Downtown Management Organization, and our consultant to develop coordinated strategies that support economic development, strengthen the business corridor, and continue to elevate the Miracle Mile without relying directly on a SID structure. Overall, 2026 will be a year of refining our plans, strengthening our tools, and making sure we are setting Dunellen up for thoughtful, balanced, and forward-looking growth. And today's meeting, which we conduct annually to discuss with your redevelopment efforts and get feedback, is part of the better understanding of that path forward. And I do want to note, because of the efforts we're doing, we are becoming a destination in our downtown. For example, the Dunellen Movie Theater is becoming a performing arts center. They're going to be welcoming the Actors Studio of New Jersey, which will be doing professional productions. They just received a $400,000 grant from the NJEDA because of the efforts we're doing in this downtown. Monmouth Museum of Arts and Children's Museum out of Monmouth County is coming to Dunellen and opening a satellite campus because of the efforts we're doing with our downtown. So, and they're both on two separate sides of the corridor, which what does that do? Those two very cohesive and overlapping type of arts related museum businesses will help bring people from one section of the downtown over to the next, which will help every business in the middle of that corridor. So these efforts are attracting new businesses. We have more coffee shops, we have more eateries, and again, being supported now by the arts, which not only is a quality of life matter, it's also an economic development initiative. So now I'm excited to introduce to you, because I'm done talking for now, and I know if you give a mayor a microphone, they don't shut up. So I'm excited to introduce tonight's first speaker, Derek White. Derek White is the Director of the Community Development for the Borough of Dunellen and the Secretary of the Dunellen Planning Board. In these roles, he helps guide the borough's planning and development efforts by coordinating zoning and land use applications and working closely with municipal professionals throughout the review process. As Director of Community Development, he also oversees construction and code enforcement, ensuring that building activity and property standards support a safe, well-maintained, and forward-looking community in conjunction with the mayor and the administration and council members. Okay, Derek, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know, it didn't leave me too much to say after all. But seriously, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. I know the weather isn't the greatest, but you made it out and hopefully this will be fruitful for you. The thing that I'm going to focus on so we can get into our professionals and they can talk about the nuts and bolts of what they do with regard to redevelopment is the overall process. There are a lot of misgivings, misunderstandings about the process. I think people tend to believe a developer comes into town, they request a project, and that project is already just deemed possible and they move forward. That is not the case. There is a process, it's very deliberate. And one of the reasons we have these individuals here tonight is because they're a strong part of that process and in compliance of that process. So the first step in that process typically will start at my office. Not physical office, but the Office of Community Development. And I'll have a dialogue with a particular potential redeveloper or developer, and I'll involve the mayor in that conversation. That's an initial conversation, the one where we introduce ourselves, we find out what they're interested in, where the property is, things of that nature to pave the ground. Then we move into a meeting where we talk the nuts and bolts of the project, what the concept is going to look like. We talk about the narratives of it, how it's going to fit into the community. At that point, if the project is deemed by myself, the mayor, and any other stakeholders in the borough, deemed to be something that we would like to move forward with, that particular developer is now introduced to our redevelopment council. And in that case, that redevelopment council will then draft an agreement, a conditional redevelopment agreement, and an interim cost agreement, which is combined together. That means that the project can begin to be funded so that these people and professionals can work on that project. So at that point, They'll begin to look at the project once the mayor and council approve that particular conditional redevelopment agreement. They'll evaluate it and see if it fits into the borough's needs, the borough's approach, and the borough's vision. From that point on, they will have an opportunity to give their comments. Once they give their comments, the consultants will then potentially report or present to the council. Once they present to the council, that again is not the end all be all, it doesn't stop there. If there are items where the council and the mayor deem we need to revisit, there's still opportunity to negotiate before moving forward to a final project. At that point, if the project is to move forward, then there is a redevelopment agreement. And at that point, the redevelopment can begin to move forward after a vote at a public meeting where you have an opportunity to speak regarding the project, and the mayor and council approves that project, it can move forward. At that point, it would move into the planning board realm, which we're going to cover later. And we have our planner here tonight who's going to go over the logistics, the ability to look at the planning and look at the long-term effects of the project for the borough. So that's all I have. Thank you. And I'm introducing you.
Now I'm going to introduce Gabe Taylor. Is a licensed professional planner in New Jersey and a certified member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, specializing in municipal planning, redevelopment, affordable housing, and community development. As the former director of downtown Cranford, he brings a hand-on experience in downtown development and placemaking. Gabe is also a board member for the Downtown New Jersey, further supporting statewide downtown and economic development initiatives. And he is part of Harbor Consultants. Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you, Mayor, for the intro. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be back in Dunellen, seeing this space. I haven't been here before, but it's a great community space, and seeing the turnout tonight, talking about redevelopment. I have a presentation. Okay. So what I'm going to be talking about is planning, and I am a planner. But when people hear planner, they're like, "Well, what do you design? What are you fashion designer?" No, I like to explain that I'm a land use planner, dealing with land uses, zoning, and redevelopment. So I am a land use planner in New Jersey. I've been in New Jersey, licensed land use planner since 2007, 18 years. So just a little background, Harbor Consultants, we're a planning and engineering firm. We do land use boards, Union County. We do redevelopment plans, represent redevelopment, affordable housing work, master plans, zoning ordinances. Our role in Dunellen, we are the borough planner, the affordable housing planner, and the redevelopment planner. So we have a lot of hands-on experiences in terms of shaping redevelopment plans and shaping the build projects. As the mayor mentioned, this redevelopment process, Dunellen, has been longstanding. There's a vision to get to this point, and it took years to get here. The current redevelopment plan is in 2023. There's been amended since several times, 2021, 2022, and the current one, 2023. There are 6 different zones in the redevelopment plan. As the mayor touched on, there's the North Avenue train station site 1, the library, the art color site, the transition area, flex transition area, the front street transition area, and the downtown core. So what does that look like? Here is a map showing the different zones within the redevelopment plan. As you see in the red, that's the downtown core. The bluish is the 3 different sites, the art color, the train station, North Avenue. You see the flex transition area, the transition area, and on the outer ends of North Avenue, and you see the Front Street transition area too. So these are the different zones within the redevelopment plan. Each one has different principles in terms of permitted uses, density, parking standards are similar for all the uses, but these are the different zones within here. So as Derek mentioned, there is a process involved in terms of getting a redevelopment project within the town. It's a multi-team effort to shape this project, to get it to a place where it can be in front of the mayor and council for review, and ultimately going to the planning board for site plan approval. The planning board is the entity within the Dunellen that approves site plans, and they would have the ultimate decision in terms of approving a certain site plan related to a redevelopment project. So once the planning board makes a determination approved, then it goes into a period called resolution compliance, where all the conditions from the planning board have to be addressed. And once that is done, then it goes into construction period and permits, and then a CO, certificate of occupancy is issued once the construction project is finished. So what has shaped here? And the mayor went over this, but I'm just gonna go a little more detail. Since the proactive redevelopment in Dunellen, you have the Dunellen project with 252 apartments, 130 townhomes, with also a 9,000 square foot retail building. The mayor touched on the Gateway project with 23 apartments. We have 526 North Avenue, also known as Metro 526, with 40 apartments. We have 150 North Avenue, and these are projects that are all completed, occupied, and residents and commercial. 150 North Avenue, 14 apartments. We have the Little Yip project, which we created facade improvements, made blending into the surrounding fabric, the brick facade. It definitely complemented the surrounding downtown properties surrounding the Little Yip building. We have the tenant fit out for El Forno Legna, having the tenant fit out, and the property owner redid the space and attracted a new restaurant use that come into downtown Dunellen. Now these are projects that are under construction. We have 120, 126 North Avenue at the end, the Plainfield border. This is for 33 apartments with also ground floor retail. We have 440 North Avenue, and that's for 8 apartments with ground floor retail. As you can see, it's nearing construction, completed construction. And we also have 3037 Front Street, which is for 8 apartments. In terms of projects that have been approved but haven't started construction yet, we have 405, 415 North Avenue with 50 apartments. 441 North Avenue with 62 apartments. And what does this all add up to? For completed projects, there's been 459 residential units. Projects under construction, 49 residential units. Projects approved, 112 residential units. And that adds up to a total of 620 residential units that have been developed, in process of being developed, and or approved to take the next steps. So you can see the redevelopment plan shaped the founding guidebook, the blueprint for development in downtown Dunellen, and having this produce 620 residential units. So you see the proactive measures, the proactive way that downtown Dunellen has been redeveloped, and seeing the real progress firsthand. So I'm proud to be here and proud to show the effort and the results of downtown Dunellen and redevelopment. Thank you.
One thing I want to stress too, and you'll notice in the projects in our redevelopment planning and the projects that have been going up and are in the pipeline, we're very adamant in our efforts that these projects are historically the skyline that Dunellen has always been in our downtown, which is 3 stories. You know, you see some towns going up 5, 6, 7 stories and completely, excuse my language, bastardizing the suburbs. We're not doing that here. We're historically keeping what the character is of downtown Dunellen, which is 3 stories, always been 3 stories. So long as I'm there, it's gonna be 3 stories. So keeping to our quaint little charm. Now, I know you see 620 residential units, that seems alarming, but in the grand scheme of things, when you see what's going on in other towns, it's actually quite small because we keep the 3 stories in our municipality. Again, keeping to that small town charm. We have to build, we don't want vacant properties or properties depreciating in value. We also don't wanna urbanize or make it a metropolitan, we're not Hoboken. We're a small square mile suburban community, we're quite proud of that. That's why we're called the Miracle Mile. So, okay, sorry, I just wanted to follow up on that. Next up is Sandy Galatio. He's special counsel at the law firm Windales, Marks, Lane and Nittendorf LLP in their New Brunswick office. He represents clients in connection with real estate tax matters, redevelopment, affordable housing, land use applications, and eminent domain issues before state, county, local boards, and commissions. He also represents municipal clients and litigates environmental matters and represents developers in connection with complex permitting issues. And Sandy, also just to reiterate, these are because we went through the process of and the timeline of what a developer goes through. These folks up here are our professionals. They represent the town's wants and needs and zoning laws, not the developer. So they represent us. So I just want to clarify that if I didn't make that abundantly clear. Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks, Mayor. Only have one slide, so I don't have to think about this. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members and members of the Dunellen public. My firm is pleased to be redevelopment counsel for Dunellen. There's some exciting projects going on in this town, and I want to thank the mayor for giving us this opportunity to speak with you. We've been redevelopment counsel for several years, and I've worked on most, if not all, the projects that Gabe showed to you. And I'm here to talk to you about one of the primary tools that the town can use to accomplish these redevelopment projects, which is the redevelopment agreement. Before we get to that, to build on what Derek had said in the process, before you get to the redevelopment agreement, the borough meets with the redeveloper. They agree on a concept plan for the project, something that fits in with the town, with the zoning that's established in the redevelopment plan. And at that point, an interim cost agreement is executed. According to that agreement, the redeveloper will deposit some funds with the township. Those funds are used to pay the borough's professionals to do the further work on the redevelopment agreement and other aspects of the project. So that pays our invoices. So that's not coming from the town. The redeveloper is conditionally designated as the redeveloper for that particular property. And then the professionals review the project further based on the concept plan. And we develop what's called the redevelopment agreement that's established in the redevelopment and housing law, which is New Jersey's law that governs redevelopment projects. It's essentially a contract between the redeveloper and the borough about how the redeveloper will accomplish the project. So it's a great tool for the borough to use to make sure the project actually gets done. Okay. It includes a description of the project, what's being built, what commercial or retail space is being built, how much of it, where is it located in the building, if there's residential units, how many are there, how many affordable units are going to be required for that particular project. It's 15% set aside of units for a rental, 20% if they're for sale units. It'll detail parking, infrastructure requirements. If there's any environmental remediation that has to be done on the property, the redeveloper has to get that done and pay for it. The copy of the agreed upon concept plan is attached as an exhibit to the redevelopment agreement. If the redeveloper 6 months later wants to change something, he or she has to go back to the council and the mayor and say, I want to change this concept plan to add another building, take off a floor. They have to approve that. And then the redevelopment agreement would be amended based on that change. Redeveloper is also required to procure all governmental approvals. And as Gabe said, that one of the most important ones is site plan from the Dunellen Planning Board, the site plan approval. To make sure that the site plan that's going to be submitted to the planning board complies with the concept plan, the redeveloper has to, according to the redevelopment agreement, present that again to present it to the borough council for a resolution that says, yes, that conforms to the concept plan and the provisions of the redevelopment plan. At that point, it can go on to the site plan hearing before the planning board. Additionally, the redevelopment agreement requires that the redeveloper is responsible for financing, designing, constructing, completing all the improvements and bear 100% of those costs. The redevelopment agreement will also absorb, once it's signed, the interim cost agreement. And so that escrow fund that was established initially continues on all the way until the project is completed. And if it runs down to zero, the redeveloper has to replenish it. That's to make sure that the borough's professionals continue to be paid by the redeveloper for their work on the project. One of the most important parts of the redevelopment agreement is the project schedule. It provides a schedule for the significant milestones for the project, submission to the planning board when that's going to happen, start of construction and completion of construction. So the redeveloper is required to adhere to those timelines in the project schedule. If they can't make those timelines, for whatever reason, a strike, the 2008 financial problem, they can go back to the borough council and ask for that to be modified. Okay. So, the borough wants to see the project done. If the request from the redeveloper is reasonable, the borough may give their consent to changing the project schedule. The redevelopment agreement also provides for project oversight by the borough. Redeveloper has to give periodic reports to the borough officials about its progress. The borough can inspect the project to make sure that it's progressing as it's supposed to be. There's infrastructure improvements required. The redeveloper has to install those. Sewer, water lines, with the Dunellen project, Dunellen Station, the redeveloper paid a significant portion for improvements to the Dunellen sewer pump station by the borough, or by the order with Greenbrook, and a new force main to go there from the project. So that was needed by the project. Redeveloper paid significant part of that. If there's mortgage financing, the redevelopment agreement addresses that. What happens if there's a foreclosure? How does the project continue to be built? The mortgage company has to foreclose on the project. They're not required to continue it, but they could if they enter into an agreement with the borough, or they could sell it on to another developer. There are certain covenants or promises in the redevelopment agreement that are required by the redevelopment statute. They include the redeveloper can only construct uses that are established and permitted in the redevelopment plan. They can't suspend or discontinue performance of their obligations. If they do so, that could be a default. That could result in them being terminated. They cannot sell, convey, or lease, or otherwise transfer the property without the consent of the borough until the project is done. Okay. These covenants are set forth in a separate document that's recorded against the land records of that property to make sure someone who's gonna come in and buy it sees that there's this restriction of property, that it can't be done without the consent of the borough. There are other redeveloper promises set forth in the agreement, including they have to properly supervise construction, they have to limit neighborhood impacts, minimize impact on traffic, provide for pest control, limit light, noise, and pollution, maintain the property as well. If there's affordable housing required, there's a section that deals with affordable housing, how many bedrooms have to be provided, things like that. Requires you, the redeveloper to adhere to the New Jersey affordable housing statutes and regulations. Jessica from McManaman will be talking a little bit more about affordable housing later on in the presentation. The redevelopment agreement provides for insurance that the redeveloper must maintain in case something happens. The borough's protected in case a claim is made against the borough, and there's insurance provided and available in case something does happen, someone gets injured, there's a car accident, things like that. The redeveloper also indemnifies the borough for claims that someone may make against the borough in connection with the construction of the project. The redeveloper would have to indemnify the borough for that. So I spoke briefly about default. If the redeveloper declares bankruptcy, doesn't adhere to the project schedule, things like that, they can be held in default. The borough has certain remedies at law and under the agreement they can pursue, including specific performance, which is something the court can grant to make them do something they're required to do. And lastly, Mayor touched on this earlier, the community benefit payment, that would be established in the redevelopment agreement also, the amount, when it has to be paid, and what it's going to be used for. The example the mayor gave is the pedestrian crossings. So those are fairly expensive. The redeveloper would be required to install those at its cost or provide a payment to the borough so that the borough can have it installed. And community benefit payments are available if the borough enters into a pilot agreement or payment in lieu of taxes for the redevelopment for the project, which Jessica will also be addressing. Okay. And that's it. Thank you for your attention, and it's a pleasure to speak with you.
So I know for some it might be a little dry, we're really getting into the guts of things, right? But I think what's important with redevelopment as we're going, right, no offense. I had 20 slides, so I'm blaming myself as well, believe me. But I think it's important for transparency purposes and for the public to truly understand what's going on, how we're doing it, how do we get to where it is, so that you have an understanding as the public for the who, what, why, and where scenario. So I know it can be a little dry at times, myself included, as I noted, but I think it's very important that you really know the nuts and bolts of all of this. And so with that, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce to you, wrong direction, sorry folks. Jessica Almeida, Esquire. She's a partner at the McManaman, Scotland and Bauman, where she represents municipalities across New Jersey in meeting and managing their affordable housing obligations. Following her graduation from law school, she clerked for New Jersey Supreme Court. She has extensive experience in affordable housing matters, including briefing and arguing affordable housing matters before the Superior Court, Appellate Court Division, and Supreme Court, and she's won a few of those cases. And she also took part in 2 of the state's affordable housing trials in Mercer and Middlesex counties. And she's here to talk to you tonight about the overview of our annual service charges, redevelopment bonds, and a hot topic in the state of New Jersey, affordable housing. Welcome, Jessica.
Okay, starting with the redevelopment is very important, and that's why we're all here to learn a little bit more about it. And as Andy started to tell us, pilots, which stands for a payment in lieu of taxes, it doesn't mean you don't pay anything. That's one of the big tools we have in our redevelopment toolbox. So I'm going on with. So It is when a municipality grants a tax, sorry, I don't be on here, a tax exemption for a project, and that project, instead of paying a traditional tax, they pay a negotiated charge, which is more than the tax that's being made on the property currently as a non-redeveloped property, but potentially less than they would be paying if it was taxed conventionally. The caveat with that is a pilot payment, the majority of that payment stays with the municipality, whereas in a conventional taxing scheme, a great portion of that payment goes to the county and to the school board. This way, the money stays with the borough, and the borough gets to decide how it's funded and where the money goes. The big thing about a pilot, though, is that you don't just get one, you have to qualify for a pilot, and there's something called the but-for test, which means but for you getting this tax exemption, which isn't an exemption, you're still paying, it's just not technically a tax, you would not be able to build this project. The project wouldn't be financially feasible, and that's when we use people like Dan Banker, who's gonna talk to you about how we look at a developer's finances and decide whether or not they're eligible for a pilot in the first place. So what happens is the redeveloper will submit a written application to the municipality, to Dunellen, and we will share it with Dan. And Dan reviews all of the numbers and he crunches them and comes back and says, well, you know, you've decided that, you know, these are your costs, but those are a little high, your rents are a little low, you're more likely to do this. And they come back with a report and say, these are the numbers that will substantiate you getting this pilot agreement. The mayor then also reviews it, talks with their professionals, and he has to also approve the pilot before it's put before the council. And because it's a financial decision, it's brought before the council and it has 2 readings and it's adopted via ordinance. So inside the agreement, it has several different components. It talks about what the minimum charge that you would ever pay. And that's usually what the conventional taxes were on the property prior to any redevelopment happening. Talks about the limitation on profits, which means you can never make more than 12% on the project. So if all of a sudden this project starts taking off and they're pulling in money hand over fist, they have to pay that money back to the borough. Doesn't happen a lot, but the statute does permit, if a project then all of a sudden becomes a financial windfall for the developer, they can't have that. They don't get to continue to have a tax exemption. They have to pay those excess profits back to the borough. There might be improvements that are in residential projects. The land tax could be credited back. That way, you know, they get a credit back. They pay the tax on the land and not the improvement, and they get a credit back for that. That's something that's also negotiated between the developer and the borough. And they have to submit each year, if you're wondering how we calculate it, each year they have to submit an audit of what they made. And that audit will help us, depending on how you're calculating what their pilot payment would be, that audit helps us figure out how much we're gonna charge them next year, how much their profits were. And so that's something they have to give us every single year, and that's something that the borough looks at, that the tax collector and assessor looks at, and Dan looks at. And it also charges, the pilot agreement also charges an administrative fee, because it's not free to have us look over everything, to have us do all of those calculations in the background each year. So that annual administrative fee helps pay for your professionals and helps pay the borough to manage the pilot. So we were talking about how you determine how much it's going to be paid. It's usually around 10% of the annual gross revenue. You can also do it off total project cost. So that's less used these days. Most of the time, it's a percentage of your annual gross revenue. It has to be at least 10%, unless there's a redevelopment area bond, which we're gonna touch on in a few minutes, but it can go up to 25%. So it can go up to 15, 16%. And again, it depends on the financial pro forma that's submitted to us beforehand. If a project can sustain a 15% annual gross revenue, then that's something that we take into consideration. But if it's not gonna be feasible, then you have a lower annual gross revenue. And the reason that you want a developer's gonna want this pilot and why it benefits us, I did say, you know, the borough keeps a larger share of the payment, but you're also looking at a property which may be vacant and without this incentive would never get built. So for 30 years, they may have a pilot and a tax exemption, but at the end of that 30 years, they're getting taxed conventionally. So the borough's taking an unproductive piece of land and making it into something that's going to put more money in, not only redevelop the area, but from a financial aspect, putting more money in the borough's coffers. So like I said earlier, 95% of it goes to the municipality, 5% to the county. And there's a maximum term of 30 years from completion or 35 years from execution of the financial agreement. And you can't do a financial agreement after you start building. So if you all of a sudden have your foundations in and decide, oh, I can't pay for this, you don't, that's too bad. You needed to have negotiated a financial agreement prior to doing any type of construction. So why an amended service charge for the project? It makes a financially feasible project, make sure that they meet our the municipality's design standards, so that when we're talking about we want a cohesive look to the downtown, that's something we get to control when we do redevelopment projects and have pilots. And like we said, generates more revenue to the municipality than a current assessment would. There's also something called a 5-year tax exemption. So not everybody would qualify for a 30-year tax exemption, but the 5-year tax exemption is geared more to homeowners or small businesses who want to do some type of improvement to their either residence or commercial property. And this reduces the taxable value of the improvement. So as many of you know, when you put an addition on or when you do upgrades, your taxes go up because your improvement is worth more. And what these 5-year tax exemptions do for 5 years, they pause that valuation. So you're not taxed on that increase. You'll still pay the taxes on what it was before. And the reason that these are a great idea is because there might be people who say, oh, I don't want to do an improvement, I don't want to do an addition because I'm just going to have to pay higher taxes. But this lets them collect for 5 years, or not collect, that lets them for 5 years take a pause on paying a higher tax. So it encourages them to do something good for the community, encourages them to remodel their home or their business, and at the end of the 5 years, the borough gets more taxes. So you're eligible, as we said, if you have a residential development, a commercial business, or an industrial business within the downtown redevelopment area. So as we said, the property owners, if you want to put, if you want to do an addition, you do get that tax break. And I don't want to have to go over everything I already said. I talk ahead sometimes. So I already talked about that. So now we're going to talk about affordable housing, which is a lot of fun. So the Mount Laurel Doctrine is a civil rights doctrine that requires every municipality in the state to provide and zone for affordable housing. And what does that mean? Well, basically what it means is we can't say every lot in here has to have a McMansion on it. It has to have 60-foot setbacks, or it has to have, a single family house on it. Because as a lot of us know, single family houses are expensive. Not everybody can afford it. And if you zone only for expensive types of homes, that doesn't give everybody an opportunity to live in Dunellen. And that's what the Mount Laurel Doctrine at its basis is, making sure that there is an opportunity for everybody to come live in every municipality. So basically, we have to use our zoning powers in a positive way to provide a realistic opportunity. So it's named for a lawsuit that happened in the 1970s, brought on behalf of a group of residents in Mount Laurel's historic Black neighborhood, because what they were doing is just what I said. They were zoning all of the historic neighborhood for single family homes with big setbacks, and forcing all of the residents that lived there and had historically lived there for their families had lived there for 100 years out of the area. And they partnered with the NAACP and they sued and won. And that's how Mount Laurel came into being. And it was Mount Laurel who they sued. So there's been several Mount Laurel cases. Each one adds a new layer of fun for lawyers and planners. But this decision, the first one, said that poor cannot be excluded. Poor people cannot be excluded from living in any town. You have to make an opportunity for everybody to live there. And all municipalities have this obligation. So it doesn't matter if you're an inner city, it doesn't matter if you're a rich community, a poor community, a middle class community, upper class, lower class, everybody has an obligation to let everybody come in and live there. So there was a recent, well, not recent anymore, 2015, there was a Supreme Court ruling, Mount Laurel 4, which kind of at the time changed the scope of affordable housing because there had been a long pause for a long time while everybody was fighting about affordable housing and how to do it and where it was going. So Mount Laurel 4, we filed declaratory judgment actions and we just showed the court that we were complying. And builders had the right to come in and sue if they didn't think your plan was working or they didn't think it provided adequate housing. There's also fair share housing, which got to appear in every single matter. And they basically acted as they didn't act, they were an intervener and they tried to make sure everybody did what they were supposed to do. Dunellen was the first municipality in Middlesex County to settle with fair share. We are like the poster child of what we're supposed to do in affordable housing. And I've used that in court and it's worked. I just tell them all the time, we've always done what we're supposed to do. There's no reason to ever think we're not going to. So we signed our settlement less than a year after Mount Laurel 4 came out and it was approved by the court shortly thereafter. And that led to the Nell being constructed because that was the biggest project within our plan in the third round. So this is all about the fourth round. I'm just going to skip that because we're going to talk more about this round. So how does the affordable housing work? And this has a lot to do with redevelopment because in the downtown redevelopment area, if a builder wants to come in and build any residential, they have to have a mandatory set aside for these affordable units. And we don't pay for them. The developer pays for them. So when I was talking about the pilot payment a little while ago, they're gonna make less on their project because they have these affordable units, which they get less rent on. So that's one reason sometimes we give a pilot because it incentivizes developers to come in and help provide the affordable housing to our community. So they will request a pilot, like I said, and in Dunellen, if they wanna build in the downtown area, they're subject to our redevelopment plan, which has a mandatory set aside of 15%. So I'm really not good at math, so I apologize. I'm gonna use the big whole number. So if you want to build a 100-unit project, 15 of those units have to be affordable. So now we're gonna talk about the fourth round, which is what I've spent the last 6 months, and so has Dave on it. The fourth round. I might. So the amended Fair Housing Act was passed by the legislature in 2024, and it affects the time period from 2025 to 2035. So they call each round, it's technically 10 years, it's just a 10-year period. So this new law formally abolished the Council on Affordable Housing, because let's face it was defunct, it wasn't doing anything anyway. And it replaced it by this mandatory process where we have to check off all of these boxes and all of these things by certain dates. And the effect was to hopefully streamline the process to make it more efficient for everybody involved. That's still up for debate. The DCA now, instead of us trying to figure out what our obligation was and guessing and hoping we were right, the DCA now, which is the Division of Community Affairs in New Jersey, they tell us what our obligation is, and then you have to either agree with it or you disagree with it. And if you disagree with it, you have to back up why you disagree with it. In Dunellen, we agreed with our numbers. We didn't think that they were outlandish. We thought that they were in line with what our community needs, and we accepted them. And that was done in January of this year. So between January and June, we worked with our planners to develop what's called a housing element and fair share plan, which is a fancy way of saying, what's our plan to put affordable units in our community? So if these were our fourth round obligations, so we had a present need, that means you already have these units here, they might need something done to them. Maybe they need their kitchens upgraded, maybe their air conditioner, their air conditioning and HVAC isn't working. That's what a present rehabilitation means. And so they found we had 79 units, either apartments or houses in the borough that needed to be rehabilitated. Prospective need means how many units are we gonna have to build in the next, how many affordable units are we gonna have to build in the next 10 years? And that came up with 23. But there's this fancy thing called a vacant land adjustment, which basically looks at how much vacant land there is in town, how much land could potentially be developed. And once we crunched all of those numbers, we came up with a 6-unit prospective need. So that means through over the next 10 years, because of everything we've done and how well we've planned over the over the third round, we only need to put 6 units of affordable housing in Dunellen in the next 10 years. So, and as an aside, we had one of the only court victories because they requested an extension for good reason to file our housing element and fair share plan. And as I was said earlier, we demonstrated to the court that we deserved that extension because of how well we've complied in the past. About 100 other municipalities requested extensions and they did not get them. So that goes to show how well we've done in Dunellen and the respect that we get from the courts and other professionals about our plans and how we plan. So we did get a challenge from Fair Share Housing, which is not surprising because they challenged everybody. Every single municipality failed to plan correctly according to them. So our challenge is more of what I call a paper challenge, where they were just asking us to back up what we had said. They asked for things like deed restrictions, copies of site plans for the approved projects that Gabe had talked about. And right now we have a settlement we mediated, we discussed with Fair Share, and we have a consent order that just has to be approved by, we'll get that in, I finished it today, we'll get it today or tomorrow. And hopefully by the end of December, we will have an order that approves our housing element and fair share plan for the next 10 years. And one of the things that we will have to do is adopt certain ordinances by March 15th to implement it. That just means basically there's going to be some rule changes, you know, how things are calculated, how many low income units, affordable income units, and we have to incorporate that into our municipal code to make sure that everything is buttoned up and that if anybody comes into town and wants to build and they look at our code, all of the rules are right there, they're explained, and everybody knows what they have to do. So as I said, we have a strong compliance record. We fully satisfied our third round realistic development potential with the Dunellen. We fully satisfied our unmet need through the downtown redevelopment set aside requirements. And we produced 101 affordable units, or they were approved. So that's all those projects, again, that Gabe was talking about earlier. And currently the downtown redevelopment area has a mandatory 15% set aside. It continues to be the primary production method for affordable units in town. And so an example of one of the projects that we are using to satisfy our realistic development potential is the South 2nd Street redevelopment. It is a former industrial property. It's been declared an area in need of redevelopment, and they're hoping to build 35 stacked townhomes, and that'll give us 6 affordable units, which, what did I say, how many we needed? 6 affordable units. The thing about that is any extra affordable units that we do have go to meet what's called our unmet need. Because remember I had that number of 79 before? Well, the realistic development potential means how many can you realistically build, right? But you still are sort of on the hook for the others, but you're not required to build them. You're required to zone for them, which we've done. So any further units that come from our downtown redevelopment area go to address that unmet need. And our housing element was adopted on time, and we will have, I think, our compliance by March of 2026. And what does that mean for Dunellen residents? Affordable units will continue to be integrated into our projects. No new large-scale housing mandates, which are going to be big developments that come in. We only, again, have required 6 units after the VLA, and everything else goes to our unmet need. Rehabilitation program will focus on improving existing housing conditions, and we're going to be required to report annually, and that'll keep us in good standing with the state. So this is always a big question, and I'll go through it really quick, but we're in, what is affordable? Which is always kind of surprising to me. Affordable, if you make less than $85,000, you qualify for an affordable unit. So you get a reduction in either the rental fees or of a unit, or you could purchase, if there's for sale units, that's taken into account. You get to purchase, if there's for sale, this price will be adjusted for the income level that you're at. And each year, so say you do qualify for one of these, either, one of the ones that are currently online or one of the ones that will be building, each year you're required to provide our administrative agent with proof that you still comply, you still are underneath the income level. Because the hope is that at some point, you're not gonna be anymore, and you can move out of the affordable rental unit and somebody else can move in. And that's how the cycle keeps going. And each year you have to be recertified by our administrative agent. And again, here's what affordable means. So there's very low, low, and moderate. So if you're a single person making around $85,000, you qualify. But if you have a family of 4 and you make $120,000, you qualify. And you can see how the income drops as you go from moderate, low, and very low. And borough is required to provide all of these within our affordable housing stock. So that's it.
Before we get to Daniel Banker, a few points. Jessica brought up about how we do a financial analysis and but for the pilot, and Dan's gonna go in greater detail. But the point I wanna make is, we do analyze, these professionals look at it, and developers are very famous for coming in for 10% across the board, right? That's what they do, their business, that's what they do. But I will say, we have assessed many of projects where they come in and say 10% across the board for 30 years, and we go and do our analysis and we say, no, you're doing 10% and then 11 or 12 or 13%. So we don't just let them get away with 10% across the board. We go towards the highest amount we can actually get for what makes sense on both sides of the negotiating table. Another thing on affordable housing really quick, I just want to nix the stigma, because a lot of people think affordable housing is subsidized housing, and not that there's any real issues with subsidized housing. People getting into affordable housing are paying it fully out of their pocket. There's no governmental subsidies to it. So just want to make it known. And also to our projects, a lot of our projects now moving forward, the land value is paying towards the school taxes. Whereas you can negotiate that out. We on the land value still agree the school deserves what they should be getting for the district. It's just the pilot that we negotiated on behalf of the municipality in our downtown, that's coming to the municipality. So with that, we're gonna hand it over to Daniel Banker with NW Financial. He's a managing director there, where he advises municipalities statewide on redevelopment and public-private investments. He has supported over 50 New Jersey municipalities on more than 150 redevelopment projects, representing approximately 18,000 residential units, 12 million square foot of industrial and commercial development, and over 10 billion in investments. So Daniel, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to say that this is my, believe it or not, 5th year at the redevelopment town hall. First one was in 2021. Obviously, a lot has happened in redevelopment since then. And I'm the numbers guy. And hopefully all of you are data nerds like me, because we have 19 slides of data to go through. So tonight I'm going to go through a sample financial analysis for a project that was approved in 2024, 405 to 415 North Avenue. I'm gonna walk through the process from receiving the developer's pilot application, going through the numbers, doing the feasibility analysis, negotiating the pilot terms, and determining the fiscal impact when it comes to new residents and public school children coming out of those redevelopments. So 405 to 415 North Avenue, it's a 50-unit project, 43 market rate units, 7 affordable. There's also roughly 3,600 square feet of ground floor retail space and 61 structured parking spaces. This is the site of the Dunellen Rescue Squad. And former back, thank you. So this is the projected unit mix. So one thing I will say to begin is the developer submits their financials, which has their estimated project cost, unit mix, unit sizes, projected rents, operating expenses, lease up units per month, cap rates, interest rates, etc. So we'll take a look at their financials and determine what's appropriate, what's not in the current market. So if we feel that their rents are low, we'll adjust them up higher. If we feel like their costs are high, we'll adjust them lower. So we don't take the developer's numbers as is, we make the necessary adjustments. So in this case, you have the 43 market rate units split between studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And then you have the affordable mix, which is a mix of very low income, which is 30% of AMI, low income, which is 50% of AMI, and moderate income, which is 60 to 80% of AMI, and that's area median income. And then you have the retail component. In this case, you'll notice the note on the bottom that says that NW increased the developer's market rate residential rents by 12.5%. So what that means is we looked at rental comps in the surrounding area at that time, current availabilities, current listings, and we felt that the developer was a little light on his residential rents, and we increased them by 12.5%. This slide shows the estimated project costs. So the developer estimated $14.5 million. Some of that, 65% of that roughly would come from private debt. The other would be developer equity. You'll see that there are certain line items, hard costs, that's the material and labor costs. You have the acquisition cost of the property. You have soft costs, which is professional fees, et cetera. And then you have the community benefit payment. So that was talked about a little bit earlier. In this case, we negotiated a $60,000 community benefit payment that can be used towards traffic signal, playground, park, et cetera, something related to the project area. So what was negotiated, and we'll get into the feasibility analysis on the next slide, but as mentioned, the developer typically requests a 30-year pilot at 10% of annual gross revenue, which is the minimum under the statute for a market rate project for the entire 30-year term. In this case, we negotiated a step up. So for the first 10 years, it's at 10% of annual gross revenue. The second 10 years, it's at 11%. And the final 10 years, it's at 12%. In addition to the percentage of gross revenue, there's a mandatory phase-in of the conventional taxes. So even though this project is going to be exempt from taxation, there will still be a land assessment put on the books, and there will still be an improvement assessment put on the books. So you will be able to tell what the project would have paid under conventional taxes if not for the pilot. So that mandatory phase-in, it becomes a greater of calculation. So the greater of the percentage of gross revenue or the percentage of otherwise applicable taxes, which is the same as what the conventional taxes would be. So we've also negotiated a more aggressive phase-in of that conventional tax percentage. In the best case for the developer, they only have 1 year of 80% in the final year 30, and they only have 2 years of 60 in years 28 and 29. In this case, we've incorporated 3 years of 80 at the back end and 3 years of 60. So in those years, they'll look at the combination of 12% of gross revenue or 60% of conventional taxes, and then 12% or 80% of conventional taxes. To take a look at what the property was currently producing in tax revenue, one site was not generating any tax revenue, lot 14, the rescue squad, and then the lot 13 was generating just over $15,000 a year, of which the borough share was about $4,000. And conventional taxes are split roughly 60% to the Board of Ed, 26% to the borough, and 14% to the county. Under the proposed pilot, the gross pilot is estimated to be about $130,000 once the building is fully occupied, of which the borough will receive approximately 95% of that amount. So that's $125,000. And in addition, it was talked about earlier, there's a 2% admin fee, which is used to pay for the administration of the pilot billing process. And over the 30-year term for this particular project, it's estimated that the borough would receive $6 million as compared to if the property stayed undeveloped as is. That same property over 30 years would generate $163,000. So it's almost an additional $6 million to the borough over the 30-year period. So here we get into the fun stuff, the feasibility analysis. So before we consider a pilot of any kind, we look at the feasibility under a conventional tax scenario. Can the project work? Can the project be built if it was required to pay full taxes? So to do that analysis, we work with the assessor to get an idea of how the property would be assessed to generate a conventional tax estimate. And then we use the rents that we've made any adjustments to, the expenses that we've made any adjustments to, and include that property tax line item to determine what the net operating income, how much money is left over after that. So in this case, it was estimated that the property taxes would be about $300,000, leaving you with an NOI of $722,000. There's a couple different metrics we use to determine feasibility. The first of which is this net project value. So what that is saying is that that's a negative $1.3 million. What that's saying is that under conventional taxes, the property would be worth $1.3 million less than it costs to build. So typically a developer is not going to build a project that is worth less than it costs to build. So that's the first metric that suggests a pilot may be necessary. Then we have a couple other metrics. IRR stands for internal rate of return. That accounts for the amount of equity that the developer is putting in. And if they sell it after 10 years, what's that average rate of return over that 10-year period? In this case, it's below 3%. A target return for that type of, for a residential development like this is somewhere 10 to 14%, so it's well below. Yield on cost, that's taking the NOI divided by the total project cost. In this scenario, it's 5%. Target return is between 6 and 7%, again, well below. And then the last and probably most important metric is the debt service coverage ratio. So as I mentioned, about 65% of the money that's going to be needed for this project is going to come from a loan, from a lender, from a bank. That bank, in these days, they're requiring a 1.2 coverage. And that means that there's going to be an annual debt service. They're going to have to pay back their loan every year. And the bank wants to make sure that you're going to be able to pay that loan back. So you need to make 120% in cash flow of the annual debt service. So if your annual debt service number is $1 million, you need to be making $1.2 million in cash flow so that they can ensure that you're going to pay that loan back. So for all those metrics, it's highly unlikely that this project would have moved forward under conventional taxes. We then move to the right table, and the only difference on the top right is the tax line item. You're going from property taxes of $300,000 to the pilot and admin fee of about $132,000. What that does is it increases the NOI. It in turn increases the project value. So now you have a positive $1.7 million project value. You have an IRR that's still at the low end, but is considered feasible. And you have a yield on cost again at the low end, but still a feasible project. And most importantly, you have a debt service coverage ratio that would suggest a lender would be willing to lend for this project. I know there's a lot of numbers and it's too small for you to see, but this is estimating the pilot revenue over the 30-year term. So rough number, just to give you an idea of the numbers, in year 2, so another thing about the pilot, because it's based on a percentage of revenue, there is a lease up period. So these units aren't occupied on day 1. There's a lease up period, and during that lease up period, the pilot revenue is going to be less than when the building is fully occupied. So we make assumptions on how many units are going to lease up for purposes of projections. So in this case, we're assuming that in year 1, it's about 50% occupied, and then in year 2, we assume 95% occupancy. So in year 2, as mentioned on the earlier slide, the gross pilot, roughly $130,000, of which the borough share would be $125,000. This is just a chart explaining if the property remained undeveloped, as I mentioned earlier, it would generate about $163,000 for the borough as compared to the pilot, close to $1 million. So it's an additional $5.8 million over the life of the pilot. So now that we've established what the pilot terms are and what the projected pilot revenues will be, we then get into the fiscal impact analysis. These residential projects are obviously going to bring about new residents as well as potentially new public school children. So majority of our analysis in terms of the projections uses the Who Lives in New Jersey housing study that was done by Mr. Listigan here at Rutgers. That was done early in the late 2000s and then updated more recently in November of 2018. And that update was to account for, among other things, new construction projects. And they reviewed tens of thousands of residential units across the state in various building types: rental, condo, tall, short, large, small. And they pulled actual resident and school children data from those projects and used it to create multipliers that you can apply to a potential development for each of the bedroom counts. A studio typically generates less residents and school children than a one bedroom, and one than a two. So we use those multipliers for all of our analyses, and they are amazingly accurate from our findings. So here we go to the projection. So based on those multipliers, this 50-unit project is estimated to generate 98 new residents and 5 new public school children. As compared to the current population, you'll see that represents about 1%, a little over 1% to the current population. And those 5 students represent about 1/3% to the current enrollment. So now that we've established the number of new residents and the number of potential new public school children, we need to assign a cost of those new residents and school children. So the Division of Local Government Services has created what they call a PFAF model, the Pilot Financial Agreement Forecast Model, which takes certain line items from the municipal budget that they feel are impacted by fluctuation in population. Because a lot of the budget is a fixed cost, it doesn't get impacted by population increasing or decreasing. So we've taken that same methodology and we've pulled the data from the most recent adopted municipal budget and determines that when you take those percentages, when you apply those percentages that are used in the methodology, the per resident cost of those additional services is roughly $130 per resident. So when you apply the 130 to the projected 98 new residents, you end up with an annual new cost of $13,000. Now we get into the cost of public school children, and there's a lot of debate when it comes to this topic. And you know, the Board of Education user-friendly budget has a per pupil section where it talks about the cost per pupil. What you're looking at here is the 25-26 proposed user-friendly budget from the Board of Ed. So the total budgetary comparative per pupil cost is about $21,000. That's made up of several line items: total classroom instruction, support services, admin costs, operations and maintenance of the plant. For purposes of our analysis, we typically utilize the total classroom instruction number. We feel that some of the other line items remain fixed and don't fluctuate because you've added 1 or 2 new school children. Mind you, the 5 that are projected here are across all grade levels. So you're not getting 5 students, you know, most likely you're not getting 5 students in 1 grade, you're getting 5 students across 12 or 13 grades. So when taking into account that, the total classroom instruction number is just over 11,000 per student. We then look at the percentage of the Board of Education budget that comes from local sources, comes from tax revenue. In this case, 34.5% comes from local sources, the rest comes from the state or other sources. So when you apply that 34.5% to the total classroom instruction number, you get a net cost per student of roughly $3,900. You apply that to the 5 students, you get roughly $19,000 in costs. This is just summarizing the cost: $13,000 roughly in resident costs, $19,000 roughly in public school children costs, for about $32,000. So the idea of this whole thing is to get to a net benefit. Typically, you don't want to build a development that's going to end up costing more than the revenue it generates. So when you consider the pilot revenue that's being projected, and you put that against the cost of the new residents and school children, what you see here, what you can't see, but what I can see here, is a net benefit of roughly $90,000 a year. And that increases as rents increase, it increases as the percentage of gross revenue increases, as the phasing of conventional taxes comes into play. So over the 30-year period, this project is expected to have a positive net benefit on the borough of $4.75 million. So that's the projections. Now we're going to get into actual data. We've been able to obtain actual enrollment data that are coming out of specific buildings that have been built. So here we have the breakdown of all the developments that are either online, under construction, or approved. And you'll see that the projection, and I will say also, there are different multipliers for both residents and public school children for market rate units and affordable units. Affordable units tend to generate slightly more residents and slightly more public school children. So this analysis breaks out the projection of public school children between the market rate and affordable components. So what this is suggesting is that across all the units that are either online, under construction, or approved, it's estimated to bring in 111 public school children. Now, I do presentations like this almost on a weekly basis, and every time I get to the public school children portion, it always appears that how could a project with 500 units only generate 20 public school children? And that's a big concern for a lot of people. And it seems odd, right? But one is these are typically very efficient bedroom sizes. You're dealing with studios and one bedrooms, which typically don't generate any public school children. They're efficiently sized, so you're not talking about 1,500 square foot, 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. And the actual data that we have suggests otherwise. It does not suggest that you're going to generate a bunch of public school children. So, to actual data. So on the top here, you have actual enrollment since the 2019-2020 school year. You'll see that it has fluctuated a little bit, but since the first redevelopment project came online, which was the Crossings came online October 31st of 2022. So we use, let's use the 2022-2023 school year as the basis, pre-redevelopment. So there were 1,289 students enrolled during that year. As of 24-25, I wasn't able to get an updated number. The enrollment number has gone up by 81 students, okay? Now we take a look at the buildings that have come online. There's 5 buildings. The Crossings was projected to have 33 public school children, which I think at the time, it wasn't me that gave the presentation because I was slightly before my time, but it was one of the principals of my firm, and I think at the time, that number seemed very low to everyone. The actual is 15. So it was projected to have 33, the actual right now is 15. Dunellen, the rental component of that building, was projected to have about 27 and a half. The updated number is 38. So it ended up coming up a little bit higher. And then you look at 150 North Avenue, slightly higher than the projection. 532 Boundbrook, which I think is called 526 Metro. That was projected to have 9, it has 0. And 745 Boundbrook was projected to have about 5, it has 2. So when you compare for these 5 buildings, the multipliers would have suggested that 79 roughly public school children would come out of these buildings. There's actually only 62. So there's 16 and a half, 16 or 17 public school children below what was projected. And in all of those analyses, even assuming that public school children projection, there was a net benefit. So it just means that the net benefit is even greater than what was projected. And then lastly, this is a summary of the total investment. Obviously, there's been a lot of projects that have come online. There's a lot of projects in the pipeline. But in terms of total investment, these projects make up $187 million worth of project costs. So developers they feel strongly about the borough and are investing, close to $200 million in the borough. So thank you for having me. and look forward to next year.
And before we get over to engineering, I just want to note, the school age impact, as a project's coming online, we communicate each project to the school district and what the expected or projected number is going to be for said project. And then throughout the year, usually twice a year, first in the beginning of the year and then towards the end of the school year, we check in again with the school district and know what those actual numbers are. So we are in constant communication so the school district can plan appropriately based upon the projects and the impact. And then we're also updating the information and current data based upon 2 checkpoints, once in the beginning of the school year when there's registration, then towards the end of the year when school year ends, because people move usually in springtime. So next up is Shane Bonzak. He is part of CME Associates, our engineers. He's a New Jersey licensed professional engineer and certified floodplain manager there. He is currently a project manager and has been with the firm for over 9 years, focusing on stormwater conveyance and management design assignments for capital improvement projects. His responsibility also involves oversight of stormwater reviews for major and minor site development and redevelopment applications submitted to the borough for board approval. So welcome, Shane.
Good evening, everyone. Stormwater has gotten complicated. So I'm in charge of a sliver of the land use board approval, stormwater conveyance and management. So I'm gonna go over some history. I'm gonna go over kind of common comments that I offer up to applicants and some of the ordinances and regulations that I follow. So to kick things off, Clean Water Act was enacted in 1972. That paved the way for the EPA to provide some guidance for water quality to states. So sometime around 2004, the DEP enacted the MS4 permit program, focusing on flooding and water quality. So back then there was Tier A, Tier B. Tier A was a little bit more complicated regulations, Tier B slightly less. Where we're currently at now, there's been every 5 or so years, the MS4 permit updates, gets more stringent. Where we're at currently, the latest was in January 2023. All of the Tier B categories have been eliminated. It's only every community in the state is all Tier A. And yeah, so the key objectives for the permit, reducing pollutant discharges, educating the public on what communities are doing to mitigate flooding, to address water quality, going over implementation of best management practices, monitoring and reporting their progress, and of course the stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is actually posted on the borough's stormwater webpage. It's pretty much a storybook for how the borough meets the MS4 permit. So, property owner, landlord, developer, whoever maybe comes to town, offers up an improvement, a development or redevelopment project. Goes through the rigorous review process that has been described this evening. But eventually it comes onto my desk where I look at the site for stormwater conveyance and management. So with the MS4 permit, it requires boroughs, towns, cities, doesn't matter the size, to adopt stormwater control ordinances. And pretty much every time the MS4 permit is renewed, oftentimes the state stormwater regulations also update, which means every time the MS4 permit updates, the stormwater control ordinance often has to update. And of course, it gets more stringent. So currently where we're at right now is, I started in 2016. There was 3 4 storms that you had to design to, water quality, 2-year, 10-year, 100-year, all based on, generally speaking, 1999 flows from NOAA. So where we're at now, there's 7 storms. This is all based somewhat related to Ida, when Ida happened, it kind of shook the state pretty bad. And, you know, climate change, you know, became a hot button item for the state. So what they did with, to address the current and future storm projections, they came up with these precipitation adjustment factors. So now there's 7 storms. There's the water quality, which is 1.25 inches of rain in 2 hours. That hasn't changed. It's been the same, you know, for a long time. But now there's 2 10 and 100 year current storms, 2 10 and 100 year future storms. And then what you do to get to those current and future storms is there's the state has adopted these precipitation adjustment factors. You know, so you're going to take the 2 year and you're going to increase that by, you know, say 2% or 3% to get you the current, but you may have to increase it by 10% to get you to future. So with that being said, stormwater has gotten quite complicated. And, you know, it makes the review process a bit tedious. But again, keep in mind that, you know, this is, the M4 permit is requiring towns to adopt the stormwater control ordinance. You know, so this ordinance is really to, you know, provide protection from the borough with flooding and to improve water quality in the state waters. So when we're looking at applications, we're reviewing against the ordinance, we're making sure that O&M manuals are submitted, making sure that they need DEP, they need soil erosion, that those approvals, you know, have been received. And again, all that is to prepare an application for a land use board approval. You know, oftentimes we will offer up comments. It was mentioned in the presentation earlier that when an application gets approved, it goes to resolution compliance. Oftentimes, the stormwater comments seem to be the last comments that stick around through resolution compliance, again, because they are under the current regulations very challenging to meet. When you have a development, whether it's development, redevelopment, residential or non-residential, you have, whether you have like an ordinance potentially that might be applicable to the site, or you'll have RSIS, which is state regulation. It's above all communities. So they both have, you know, the more stringent stormwater requirements are held under the borough ordinance, of course. RSIS are slightly less stringent stormwater requirements. And also what dictates a project from being a major development is slightly different between the ordinance and RSIS. But generally speaking, they're about the same. The big difference is the ordinance has those current and future storms. So this is where things get you know, complicated, you know. So a lot of times an applicant will come in and, you know, they'll put the bare minimum on the plans. They'll maybe, you know, throw a basin here and there, and, you know, they'll throw in a small little rain garden in the corner of the site. So when you submit an application for you know, for stormwater compliance, there's 4, you know, besides the storms that I had described, there's 4 main components of stormwater performance. There's stormwater runoff quantity, stormwater runoff quality, groundwater recharge, and green infrastructure. And they have to hit all those marks, or you won't approve the site. So to get to the story I was just describing before, let's just say you have two detention basins, and then you have like 1 small little rain garden, and the applicant's like, okay, well, I'm meeting quantity and I'm meeting quality because I have my rain garden, and I'm also satisfying green infrastructure, or GI. So my answer to that is, well, no, you're not. Detention basin is not GI. You know, you're only capturing maybe half the site for water quality purposes. Maybe you're only providing the rain garden and maybe an MTD or manufactured treatment device in another part of the site. And you're supposed to be capturing all new motor vehicle surfaces and treating that to 80% total suspended solids. So there's a lot of layers to stormwater. I won't go into heavy detail because I'm just gonna be, talking in circles here. But yeah, there's plenty of common issues that I look for in sites. Again, quality, quantity, recharge, green infrastructure, groundwater mounding, our BNP's GI, BNP's being basins, manufactured treatment devices, stuff like that. One of the other big things to stormwater, it's inherently theoretical. You have, the DEP tells us, or the NRCS or USDA or whoever tells us how to develop a hydrograph. And then you have the DEP coming in every couple of years telling you how to calculate time and concentration. All data that is required to build a stormwater runoff hydrograph, build precipitation and stormwater runoff volume. Okay, so all that is fine. You can design something on paper, you can build plans, build reports, everything's fine. But one of the most important things is whether it's going to function as designed. So that's where post-construction testing is one of the big things that we actually focus on. Make sure that soil testing, operation maintenance manuals are prepared, and yeah, making sure that if a BNP needs to be deed restricted, that it's deed restricted, so it stays there, for the existence of the site. So again, plenty of layers for stormwater. The first set of topics there is all for like major developments, but things get a little complicated when you're a minor development, when you have a local resident, or let's just say you have a small commercial site coming into the borough. They want to build, develop, or redevelop, and they don't meet the definition for a major development. So, but we also don't want them to just freely discharge stormwater runoff to nearby surrounding areas. So with that being said, we will still continue to ask for subsurface soil exploration. We will still ask for post-construction testing. And instead of having these applicants design for the 7 design storms I described before, they're only going to be designed to the 25 year, which is typical for like storm sewer design. So with my review, there's plenty of resources that I have to look at, ordinances, state regulations, and then a slew of documents that the DOT and the DEP have prepared. So yeah, that's it.
We're in the home stretch. Next up, we're talking Dunellen Planning Board process, and Derek White, our Community Development Director and Planning Board Secretary, is gonna come up and do a nice quick summary.
Thank you, Mayor. And it will be a quick summary. Thank you all for hanging in here. Just wanted to give an overview of the purpose and process for the planning board. All right, it's working. The Dunellen Planning Board, by ordinance rather, was created as a single jurisdiction board, which simply means they act both as the planning board and the zoning board of adjustments. It's composed of 9 members, the mayor or his designee, and a borough official who is not part of the governing body, but is appointed by the mayor, 1 other governing body member, and other citizens. So you can see we have a broad array of input, insight that's available. The role is to balance development and regulatory compliance to ensure the growth of the community is there and sustainable. And it's easy to look here, don't mind. So the role of the planning board in areas in need of development investigations. That's simply when the borough's governing body, the mayor and council, asks if a project should be in need of a redevelopment. At that point, the planning board holds a public hearing. They make a non-binding recommendation to the mayor and council. At that point, if the property does qualify, the mayor and council can introduce what we call a redevelopment plan, which was touched on earlier in the meeting. The planning board then reviews it against the master plan or the overall plan for the borough in terms of redevelopment. Then it moves to site plan approval. The redeveloper makes an application for site plan approval to complete the redevelopment. And just like any other development project, they have to go and get the board to look at it in accordance with municipal land use law. And we all have mentioned about various public meetings and hearings, so it's nice to know when they are. For the planning board, it is the last Monday typically of the month at 7 p.m. and it's in the council chambers in the courtroom /courtroom. The public hearings are all available for the previous slides, for the previous portion that has been gone over here. And legal notices are sent out to the property owners within 200 feet by law. That is all I have for slides, but I do want to just reiterate one point. I'm not sure if everyone saw what we did here tonight, but we talked about the process. We had our professionals come in and drill down on some detail and some specificity of the process so that you can see that this is not arbitrary. It's not something that just happens or gets a rubber stamp. You can also see the amount of work that our professional team puts into these projects, because we've been here how long and they just spoke about it. They haven't done the actual work. So you can see that there's a lot of due diligence that goes into these projects to make sure that they're going to benefit our community and they're going to be sustainable and bring value and enhance the vision of the borough. Thank you.
Okay, last at bat, we have Dr. David Listikin, a professor at the Blaustein School and Associate Director of the Blaustein Center for Urban Policy Research. He's a leading author of Urban Redevelopment, Historic Preservation, and Development Impact Analysis. He's one of the architects of this student school age impact study that we spoke about earlier. And he's a great friend to the borough of Dunellen, and every year he always seems to get us into a study class for his students, so we're happy to have that great relationship. He brings along with him two second-year MCRP students, Imran Bukhari, who focuses on transportation and transit-oriented development through his work in transit-friendly planning department, and Justin Lovan, who concentrates on community development and housing with a strong interest in creating diverse, walkable community centers. And they are here today to speak to you about the recent study that they've been working on and called for Planning for a Great Downtown. So welcome, gentlemen.
I'd like to start on a personal note. I've been teaching 50 years, which is a scary number. I've been teaching urban redevelopment for, 20 plus years. I always learn when I come here. So thank you, Mayor, for opening the door for Rutgers to learn about the quote unquote real world. Before the students, who are the star of this presentation you'll hear, look, let me give you some context, what this study this year is all about. So the premier planning organization is the American Planning Association, and there's a New Jersey chapter. I happen to be on the executive committee of that. And to their credit, they have an annual Great Downtown Award. And this has been going on for 19 years now. And Dunellen won that award. There are 564 municipalities in New Jersey. Only 19 have been so awarded. Dunellen won last year and Metuchen this year. And you're in very good company. You know, other awardees was Montclair and Westfield and Summit, et cetera. So we have this award, and actually, when you look at the language of the award, it's very archaic. It's more central business district. The downtown is business, and clearly that has changed. You know, if anything, in Dunellen and many communities, businesses are very key to the downtown, but housing is an anchor as well. One reason why you're seeing so much housing. And we said, you know what, this award's been going on 20 years. The language is sort of behind the times. We are going to look at what are a larger frame of attributes that define a great downtown, quote unquote, and what are strategies to realize that great downtown. All right, so wonderful group of students. We looked at these attributes. And one thing you see in Dunellen, you don't have meetings like this in other towns. Usually the meeting is as a project and then the consultants come in. No one has an annual meeting on redevelopment. No one surveys their residents like in Dunellen. And so we said, all right, we're gonna do planning stuff and come up with a multi-dimensional, intersectional definitions of a great downtown. We're then going to survey Dunellen residents. What do they think of the important attributes? Also surveying Dunellen residents, what some of the great features of the Dunellen downtown, and as well as challenges. Inevitably, there are challenges. And to give you a larger context, we are presenting this to the executive board of the New Jersey APA chapter Friday. And there are also other products to the studio beyond these PowerPoints, and you're only getting a snippet of the larger effort in today's PowerPoint. We're coming up with a toolkit of how communities can realize a great downtown. A lot of that really we've learned from Dunellen, you know, as well as other work, and also we are sharing policy recommendations for state government and local government in New Jersey, how they can move towards fostering great downtowns. So I wanted to give you that context. We always present last. I've told the students, keep it short, all right? So you're getting a executive summary version of some very good work done by the students.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Imran Bukhari, and I'm joined with my classmate Justin Lauman, and from Rutgers University, from Rutgers Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. We are very thankful and grateful to have this opportunity to share our graduate studio project with you guys here today. Now, before I get into our graduate studio project, I did want to thank a few people. Firstly, with our student authors, many of which weren't able to make it here today, but Daniel is one of them who's contributed to the graduate studio project. Many of them had final exams today, so they couldn't make it. And then, of course, Professor Listigan and Dr. Listigan for helping guide us throughout this process. And from the Dunellen side, I wanted to thank Mayor Salento for opening his doors to us, along with Billy George and Derek White. So as an overview for our presentation, I'm gonna start off by saying the goal of our graduate studio project was to figure out what makes up a great downtown. Right, so what are the attributes that make up a great downtown? We created a list of attributes. And then from there, we had the opportunity to survey Dunellen residents on those attributes along with that to survey residents on what they believe should be in a great downtown. Now, my colleague and classmate Justin will talk more about our toolkit. And our toolkit, like the professor mentioned, is a resource for communities that will help them create a great downtown, that will help them realize a great downtown. And then Justin will also talk a little bit about Dunellen. So above all, the residents make up a great downtown. Those are the people that are sitting, most of you sitting in front of me here right now. And from this survey that we conducted in Dunellen, we've identified several attributes of a great downtown as well as the strategies that make them great. So this is a list of the past awardees from the Great Downtown Award of the New Jersey American Planning Association. Of course, Dunellen won in 2024 and the Touch-In was this year's winner. And now this is the list of attributes that my studio class came up with. It is from a compilation of our own practical experience as planners across different jurisdictions and different organizations, along with dialogue from professional planners across New Jersey, and also a robust literature review of what authors and what researchers have already said and talked about what makes up a great downtown. So just to name a few, it starts off from a diversity of different businesses, a diversity of housing typology, having identifiable main street, having a well-designed downtown with a distinguishable characteristics, and that's just to name a few. So now moving on to the results from the Dunellen resident survey. We created an English version and a Spanish version, of course, to accommodate the large Spanish-speaking population here in Dunellen. And it sort of looked like this. So we asked the residents to look at all these attributes as the first part and sort of rate them on how important it is to them. So with the first attribute with 89% of residents said that safety and comfort was one of those attributes that is very important to them. And now that includes, and from our research and our understanding, safety and comfort is one of those foundational attributes that if there is safety and comfort in a town, then it will create an environment where the other attributes can be risen. Now on to the next one. The second most important, according to the residents of Dunellen, was economic vitality, with 85.7% of people saying that is very important to them. And now economic vitality speaks to the diversity in businesses and the resiliency that comes with that in creating a strong local economy. Next was accessibility and connectivity, with 71.4% of Dunellen residents saying that it was very important to them. And this has to do mainly in Dunellen's case with the train station and the public transit and transit access connectivity to the larger region. The fourth most important one was identity and aesthetics. And if we sort of zoom out a little bit from this first part of the survey, what we figured out was what do residents value most? And it seemed to be that residents valued walkability and transit access, along with that small downtown feel and that small town feel that you get here in Dunellen. And of course, it's also great to mention some of the challenges. And one of the interesting challenges that they mentioned here in Dunellen was the redundant business types. In other words, having maybe too much of the same business. And I think that this is a common challenge that many small communities face in New Jersey. Mayor Salento sat with us and talked about the strategies that they're employing in order to create that diversity. And then the second part of the survey was figuring out what people want more of. So this included, it started off by people telling us that they wanted a better leisure walking experience, a better walkability in the downtown area, more arts and entertainment. But then following from that redundant business types is one of the challenges. They also answered what are the most desired new uses that they're looking for. And that included more restaurants, more grocers, having a better nightlife scene in the downtown. And also, most importantly, they talked about what they want to see less of. And that includes gyms, salons, and maybe traditional office space that could take up the downtown area when they would want these other desired spaces. So overall, this really helped inform us about what are the attributes of a great downtown. And I hope that Dunellen can take this and it can help them out. So thank you.
Moving on to our strategies for how to actualize this for municipality. So moving on to our strategies to help towns actualize the great downtown, and this will be available for anybody parties interested. But we're putting this together as a multi-page document detailing the strategies, which we'll go into a little bit of depth here. So some important programs for the state of New Jersey for redevelopment in particular. Main Street, New Jersey helps to revitalize downtowns. It's issued every 2 years. It's a $750,000 grant that towns apply for, and you could use it for things like, say, technical assistance, infrastructure assistance. Another important authority for this is the Economic Development Authority. As we discussed earlier, they can assist with certain downtown projects. The transit villages, which is particularly pertinent for Dunellen, given that we have the NJT station here, which helps to assist communities to make their transit centers more effective as transit centers, activate those transit centers better. DEP is important, especially with regards to brownfield sites and making sure contamination is cleared up. Redevelopment authorities, pretty self-explanatory. Metropolitan planning association organizations that would generally be on the transportation level in the metro. On the federal level, obviously you have federal development incentives and supports. The community development block grants, obviously, is foundational. But you also have the HUD, Urban Redevelopment, the Federal Economic Development Administration, one that is a little bit unconventional for a list like this, but ultimately is crucial for downtowns, is the Small Business Administration. Because small businesses ultimately are the backbone of many downtowns in America. So with that said, some other on the local level, some downtown redevelopment programs, facade and signage programs are very important for small downtowns, especially with your small businesses. Historic district and tax credits that can help create an identifiable, unique area for the downtown, so you can meld, new and old. Main Street, New Jersey, we touched on a little bit before. Support for pedestrian access around train stations from NJT. That'll be with coordination of pilots we discussed about a bit earlier. So moving on to Dunellen at a glance. Obviously, there's been quite a bit of development over the last 100 years in Dunellen, but you can still see the grid architecture. So it's growing, but it's recognizable, which is good. You can see the Raritan Valley line as the sort of center of the sort of delineates north and south. So redevelopment. Redevelopment really kicked off in the early 2000s, 2001. Really has ramped up since 2017, as we discussed earlier. Over $200 million has been invested in downtown Dunellen between 2017 and 2024, which is a very impressive amount of money, especially during some of that was a rather uncertain economic time, so it's impressive to be able to get that done. The largest redevelopment project was the Art Color Factory, which was redeveloped into Dunellen, which we discussed a bit earlier, and there have been 13 other redevelopment projects in downtown Dunellen. On the community level, Dunellen is known, the downtown is known as the Miracle Mile, given the 1 mile length. During COVID, this was one of the few communities that actually kept outdoor programming going. And ultimately, one thing that we really found in this study was that community is really what builds a downtown. So being able to have that advantage ultimately did help keep the community spirit going. But some challenges, 99.9% of the town is built up, that's not abnormal for the north central Jersey region. Affordable housing mandates and missing middle, especially consideration of ownership, with affordable housing, not just rental units. And also balancing parking and transit. With that said, what does all of this development mean for you? Well, what it does allow is it does help moderate property taxes. And what you can see here is over the past 50 years, starting from 1970. In 1970, the tax rate was equalized, property tax rate was 3.48 per thousand. Now, in 2025, it's 2.399. It's very rare that you can have a tax rate actually decline, but ultimately, smart and redevelopment with community input has allowed this to be accomplished. So this is a very big accomplishment on the town's part. We'd like to thank the town, and we'd like to thank all of you for being here. Again, community input really ultimately was the foundation of what makes a great downtown in our study. So we'd like to thank you for attending, and thank you so much to Mayor Salento and Derek White. Thank you.
And we kept you guys last as a learning lesson for your case studies, because some planning board nights, which you will be in the future part of, go very late. So this was a learning lesson for you folks. Okay, so we'll leave it open. Thank you to the Blossom School, Dr. Listican, and the students again. Give them a round of applause. Okay, so at this time, we'll leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers. We have an additional microphone for those who are in the audience. I don't know how many people are attending in person, but the floor is open for questions, and we're all here to answer. Yes, right up here. If you wouldn't mind waiting for the microphone. Sure. And I'll actually pass the microphone for you folks up here.
First of all, thank you for the transparency. Heard a couple speakers say that you don't see this in other towns, so really I learned a lot. It was a lot of information, but it shows that you know, the transparency is really important, and it's assuring to people. I guess the question that I have would be for Mr. White. As far as the planning board is concerned, what kind of factors go into a site plan being approved or disapproved? Like what factors might be relevant there?
Can I even answer that? Or?
Well, I guess legally, your limit on what you can answer in terms of what can and cannot be approved, just because when it comes to planning board, the factors are the zoning. So if it's within the zoning, or if they have a variance, they have to justify the variance. But you really can't say what can and cannot be approved, because you're basically giving away an applicant what, you know, ahead of time. So like, for example, if an applicant comes in and say, I have X project, and we already in this meeting say, oh, that's fine, that'll get through. But basically, you know, we can't, am I saying this right, attorneys?
There's laws you have to follow.
Yeah, there's laws. So basically, anything within the confines of the laws is in the site plan. If there's variances, they have to justify, and the planning board has to take that into consideration with the professionals and legal counsel. Best way to describe it?
Yeah.
Do you want to add to it? Okay, sorry. If it turned into a legal question, I figured I'll take the shot for it, why not? Did that address your question?
Yeah, I guess the follow-up to that would be, can the board consider the benefit to the community?
Well, I guess that's yes and no. Well, yes, ultimately yes, because the benefit has already been designated through a redevelopment plan and zoning laws. So long as the project goes, and it's part of that whole review process, right? As Derek was saying, if a study goes before the planning board, it's been reviewed and recommended to the council, that basically, if it's approved in mayor and council, designates that those laws are what benefits the community. So to your question, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions for anybody in the hall?
I have a question on the, you answered most of it on the sewer. like you said, that, all those apartments, they'll put new lines out to the old sewer line, but what happens to the old sewer line through town? We had that sewer line that runs through town, that's really old out there.
Well, if one of the professionals want to speak to it, I will say each project has a capacity study completed to make sure that the sewer can hold it. If there's additional improvements, like you saw with the Nell at the Art Color, they have to provide opportunity to develop a new, like the force main or any lines that are associated to it. So, and it also, the revenue coming in for the project allows us to develop better a capital improvement plan to reline those lines throughout town, replace them. So any of the professionals want to address that question?
Yeah, so like I can't speak on sanitary, but I can speak on storm. So what I said before about the design storm, the 2, 10, 100 year for major developments, and then 25-year design storm for minor developments. What we're really looking at for both is the 25-year design storm when it comes to storm sewer design. That's typical for that sort of system. So an applicant will come in, they will build out a site. Let's just say it's a vacant lot, all grass, and then they build a 3-story building with parking and all that stuff with basins. That site can't discharge more than what it's currently doing. And if it's a major development, it actually has to discharge less than what it's currently discharging to. So you're designing to those design storms I had mentioned in my discussion. But when it comes to storm sewer design, you're also taking a step further, saying, okay, he's meeting the 2, 10, and 100-year design storm peak flow reductions. But what is he also doing for the 25-year design storm? Is he sending more flow to the local storm sewer, or is he matching, or is he sending less? So.
Okay. Now, you said something about the pump houses. You said that you were improving them in order to take the load. Is that what I heard?
So for example, the Dunellen Station project, the pump station by North Washington Avenue by the border of Greenbrook, they funded a majority of it because their project was going to impact the majority of that pump station. Plus, because of the size and capacity of the project, they have a pump station on site. Plus, they did the improvement of the force main leading up to that pump station and beyond, actually into Greenbrook.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, you can stay with the engineer.
Okay.
Couple quick questions.
Thank you. Although I need my steps.
Yeah, so in the stormwater, is the Freehold Conservation District still involved, or are they out of it?
Yeah, no. So they are involved. When a site disturbs 5,000 square feet or more, that's when the Soil Conservation District will get involved. What we do from a borough perspective is, there's ordinances in place that requires an applicant to meet those, that district's requirement. And really we'll just say, as long as you're meeting stormwater control ordinance and we're okay with off-site stability, pending approval from the local soil conservation district, then that's acceptable.
Okay, yeah, I can have an appreciation for what you do, because we had that here years ago when we did some work along the creek. So they're an agency to work through. Along with that, I'm part of the Middlesex County Destination 2040 Committee. We were looking at a larger level, upstream. We have a lot of people that are well ahead of us, adding into our creeks and rivers, all the way out through New Brunswick to the Raritan, out to the Staten Island, the bay. When we do our flows, those flows take in consideration of the flow coming into the river from where the river begins or the creeks, or is it just Dunellen, what that building could produce in the town?
Yeah, so for a site plan application that's maybe near a stream, we won't really analyze the stream. We'll look at, say, FEMA flood mapping or DEP state developed flood mapping, and we'll consider, if there's any, flood damage concerns for an application. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, the site discharges into a stream. It won't really matter considering flows from all site areas, because that site in the borough needs to meet stormwater reductions. You know, so like whether it's a 10 CFS or 100 CFS flowing in the stream, if there's a site that discharges into that stream under a post-developed condition, they need to meet those runoff reductions. So I can't really say that we, consider flows from, up the mountain in Warren or in Greenbrook or anything like that. It's more so a regional, floodplain evaluations that we look into.
Okay, I appreciate that. And one last one for me, the pilot, maybe for the legal, if the property's sold, is that transferable?
Yes, for the life of the pilot, but there are special rules that have to be followed. Oh, hi, sorry. Yes, so for the life of the pilot, like we said, that was 30 years. It can be transferred along with the ownership, but there are certain notifications they have to give to the borough, and there's certain requirements they have to also meet when transferring it. So they can't transfer it to somebody who's not qualified. And they have to be what's called an urban renewal entity, which is a special kind of business that's formed. It's a single entity. So the only thing they can do is manage that project.
Okay, I appreciate that. Knowing that the transparency is really, really good. Last thing for Blaustein, shout out, and also Voorhees Transportation. Love your work.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve's a longtime firefighter in Dunellen, so thank you for your service. And yes, the 526 Metro was an example of what you just brought up. The property owner came in, got the project approved with everything attached to it, and then deemed that he was not able or willing to actually develop it, so he made the decision to sell it to the what was the developer's name? I'm blanking. Mr. Jane, but the company Vision Stream LLC, and so they had to come in and they had to prove that they were qualified to actually build it and go through another rigorous process of if it doesn't work out, there's clauses in the redevelopment agreement that basically, give us legal authority on certain things. Any other questions for anybody in here? Also, anybody who's online joining us, if you have a question, we're here to answer it too. In 4 minutes. Somebody online, and we just can't hear them.
Yeah, take a look.
We have a question?
There is one in the Q&A. It says, are the slides available on the city's website?
Yes, so good question. So you can go in all prior presentations over the last 5 years, and every single redevelopment agreement and financial agreement, every project, and every school age impact study we've done is on the website at dunellen-nj.gov/redevelopment, and that's where you can keep updated to most things going on. And hello, Miss Moore, how are you? And yeah, so everything's on there, and you can read all the messages from the mayor and any other public document we've issued out on pilots or redevelopment, because this is an end cap of the year, but we also do, starting in September, information on messages from the mayor on redevelopment leading up to this, as well as a insert in the mailers that go home for taxes that have the whole thing on it as well. So yes, on the website, underneath the redevelopment section. And all council meetings are on our YouTube channel as well, and this is where that's located as well. Any other questions online? Anybody else in person? I know it was a very lengthy evening, but again, it's a big topic. It's impacting how we're moving the town forward, so it's very important that we spent these 2.5 hours together now, so. Other questions? I guess you guys did that great of a job and answered all of them. So thank you all. Our next council meeting is December 15th at 7 p.m. You can join us in chambers or online because we're hybrid. We like it accessible to everyone. And January 1st is our reorganization meeting. You're welcome to join us there at 12 p.m. in the chambers as well. God bless you all, and happy holidays. Enjoy your